Hi there. So this is something I've been wanting to talk about for a while, and I guess just because of what's happening in the world right now, it feels like a good time. I find myself really pulled between extremes right now, and the extremes feel like they're pulling farther and farther apart. So I found myself talking to someone last week and saying the following: I'm trying to figure out how to stay informed without becoming obsessed, how to stay connected to my righteous rage and all the other feelings without making myself sick, and how to stay optimistic without becoming delusional. And I think I'll be working with that for a while. There's no resolution. I hope you weren't hoping for a how do I do this type of video, because this isn't it. But what I do notice is that there are certain things that help me stay in the middle without sort of veering toward those extremes. And meditation, swimming, yoga, eating, laughing, sleeping, all of the sort of biological, basic kind of needs have to be met in order to have any kind of cognitive flexibility and resilience when things feel dysregulating. But something that has really helped me over the years, and I struggled with it, and that's why I want to talk about it, has been taking antidepressants. And, I was a kid who was sort of not understood growing up. I was too everything. And I felt like I was not enough everything. And so I've talked openly about the fact that I started drinking at a very young age and really used that to self-medicate. But what I realized in young adulthood was that essentially there was nothing wrong with me, but that I had not figured out a helpful way to cope. And so I had and the fact that I was probably wired to feel depression and anxiety, right? So I was probably a little more likely to feel these things. And then as a very sensitive person, that just kind of layered on top of it. And so I struggled for a long time with taking antidepressants because they were not natural. I wanted to do it naturally. And I hear this a lot. And this is why I think the idea of natural is potentially dangerous. Sort of like how we use the word chemical. Like a chemical is something scary and toxic and dangerous, when in fact everything's chemicals, right? We have to think a little bit deeper about the language that we're using. And so natural is the word of the day that I'm talking about. Even when I had gone on antidepressants and I was in the process of quitting drinking, part of my fantasy was that I would be able to come off of the antidepressants because it was more natural. But what I've realized, especially in the last 10 years or so, is what a farce that is. And how if I need some sort of chemical assistance in order to stay regulated, in order to stay in the middle of those extremes, then that makes a lot of sense, because the world that we're living in is not natural. This is not natural, the way we're living, right? Separated from one another, unable to talk to one another, afraid for ourselves sometimes, afraid for our kids and who comes after us sometimes, really feeling like it's not possible to find common ground with so many people. And even just the repercussions of COVID and being sent to our rooms figuratively for a couple of years. That's not natural. What's natural is being together, feeling safe, knowing that we belong, feeling hopeful, right? And so taking antidepressants has helped me find some connection with that middle way. And it's something that you have to kind of continue to track and pay attention to. I always advocate for people to work with a psychiatrist as opposed to just their primary care clinician, because psychiatrists will follow up with you much more regularly, and they just have a better understanding of how to play with these things to meet your needs. But I invite you to just notice if there's any shadow boxing going on for you with yourself about how you should take a natural approach to things as opposed to give yourself a little help, a little buffer, a little support. Maybe it's in the form of antidepressants, maybe it's in the form of therapy, maybe it's in the form of a recovery program or something like that. But really start to question like the logic there. Are we expecting ourselves to use a word that has nothing to do with mindfulness necessarily, but is being used currently? Are we expecting ourselves to raw dog it in this dysregulating world without any help? I don't know who that's helping. I don't really think that's helping anyone. I certainly don't think, if it doesn't allow you to stay engaged in the middle with your life, that it's helping you. And the more I think about it, the more I live, the longer I live, the more I think we really need people who are willing to be in the world, who are willing to be curious, who are willing to stay in the middle, who are willing to not get seduced by the idea of clamping down on an ideology and then being immovable. We need to be open and be willing to learn and willing to listen. And for many of us, if we need help with that, whether it's with depression or anxiety or mood regulation or anything like that, why wouldn't we give ourselves that little bit of support? Now, I know this is a tricky topic right now, and there are a lot of people who are against these things. I'm not saying it's 100% one way or another, but I think we need to be more nuanced in how we think about this. And if you find someone willing to support you to navigate toward what would be your middle way, then that might start to feel like that's the right choice for you. And you might start to feel more natural in your own life, like you're not just white knuckling it. So let me know your thoughts. I can just imagine some of the comments I'm going to get. Whatever, bring them on. But I say this from my own experience, and I say this because I actually really care that we go into the nuance and we move into the often uncomfortable complexity of what is really happening right now. See you next week.